Negotiation is throughout your entire business career. Some would say parent-child as well. Learn from the very best. Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Welcome David Knoch, CEO of DocuPace. What's up?
How's it going? I'm glad to see I'm the only one wearing socks today.
Yeah, good job.
Well, let's see. Even some color.
Yeah.
Not surprised.
Nice
I watched your podcast. I'm like in the top quartile for socks.
Definitely.
Well, you're in the. We had a sport coat the other day. Is this two sport coats?
It's two sport coats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rare, socks are rare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you look great.
Thank you.
Including your haircut.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I know a guy.
He does know a guy. That was off the camera. But where were you raised?
I was born in Western Massachusetts, raised in a small town in Massachusetts called Pepperell, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Kind of just south of Nashua, New Hampshire, if anybody's familiar with that part of the country. So,
All right. Wow.
yeah.
Did you do all the way through high school there?
Yes, I all the way through high school. I went to UMass Amherst, and so
Yes.
I'm a proud public school graduate in a state full of beautiful private institutions.
Yeah.
I'm the public school kid. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Family still up there?
my mother's there. I'm going to see her for Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Awesome.
You can edit that out because you're going to publish this in February.
No, it just means he'll have spent time with his mom and at her home. It's incredible. We named this Decision Points for a reason. Decisions that we make young, middle, older, yesterday, maybe today, that have impact. Maybe touch the hot stove and don't want to do that again, or you made some habits that you want to repeat. What are some decision points, junior high, high school, early years that you think back that shaped me?
Yeah, there's probably a few moments. I'll give you maybe a little deeper story on a couple of them, a little lighter story on a few. I mean, I do think that I probably had a slightly more adverse upbringing than others in my peer group.
Really?
And without going into all the details on that, I mean, we grew up solidly middle class, but there were some challenges.
Just one of those, if it involves jail, we do like to hear jail stories.
Yeah, we'll keep that out of the conversation, whether that was part of it or not. May or may not have been.
Yes.
But I do think there was an inflection point. The inflection point was sort of a culmination of challenges I faced probably when I was younger.
Yep.
My challenges dealing with those, culminating sort of in my early college experience where I was clearly on the wrong track. And you sort of add together that, I don't know, sort of 4 years or so from 10th grade through freshman year in college. And I had a pretty strong realization that the path I was on was probably not a good path. I was a grade ahead, so that didn't help me. I was probably a little less mature for the situation I was in and dealing with stuff at home that most kids my age weren't dealing with.
Yep.
And so I do think I processed that the right way eventually. And I do think the sort of clarity that I arrived at in my life early in life, I think has been helpful even till now.
Well, that's exactly why we're here, David. So we're going to go as far as you're willing to go, because I think it helps encourage all of us that there's different paths. I heard struggle and I heard some clarity. How'd you get clarity so soon? I mean, if you got it at 20, 21-ish, you're ahead of the curve, but it sounds like you might have had some more struggle than maybe other people did.
Yeah, I mean, that was probably 17. I mean, I didn't graduate from college. I turned 21 the month I graduated from college, right? So it was pretty early.
Yeah.
There was a pretty bad moment that I was responsible for back then. And I think it sort of brought that probably 4-year window to the forefront for me. It became pretty clear that if I stayed on the path I was on, it was going to end up perhaps in a jail situation like you described. If I changed the path, which I knew I was capable of, perhaps something was available better for me. I didn't learn the words for some of this until much later in life.
Well said.
But I certainly came to a realization that I did not need to be a victim of the circumstances that surrounded me, right? That I had some choice, some agency in all this, and I could make different decisions. They may not have been easy. I may not have been prepared for them, whatever the case may be, but I still had the power to choose.
Yep.
Again, I didn't get the words for it till later, but looking back on it, that's what I concluded. Like I could do something about it.
We've all got stuff that has helped shaped us. And I think this is going to resonate, because some people, David, they could have said, I'm the luckiest son of a gun in the world and stayed down that
keep
path
going. Yeah.
because you got away with it. But for whatever reason, you made the choice to go a different path.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have a sense of, your guys' perspective on faith. Mine is probably not as Scott knows, not quite as formal, but something was afoot there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's well said.
It's very, very well said.
Yeah.
Very well said. So you graduate. Tell me about brothers, sisters.
Got a younger brother.
Yeah.
Year and a half younger than me.
Where is he?
Princeton, New Jersey.
Okay. Did he go to Princeton? Just lives there?
He did not.
Yeah.
Yeah, he works there.
That's all. Does he work at Princeton?
He does.
Very cool. We have one team member who graduated from there, and she's quite proud and likes to tell us all that where she went to school. So what happened after college? How'd you get to Texas? What's your journey?
Yeah,
from graduating from.
Yeah, I mean,
university?
I was, as much as I realized sort of earlier in college that I needed to get on a better path, I still didn't really find that path. I mean, I graduated from college in 92. Economy sucked. I was a political science major, wanted to go to law school. I had worked for an attorney and realized that I didn't want to be one. And so I was sort of left without the same, I wasn't going into a job like many kids today probably do leaving college. I was concert photographer for the university's concert production company. It's the second largest in the U.S. at the time. And so I photographed Pearl Jam and Beastie Boys and Bob Dylan and Fish.
No way. Do you have access to some of them? Yeah.
And then I ran the heavy metal radio station, and I wrote the music column for 3 newspapers at the time. And so between the photography and music thing, I found myself just working for camera stores for a while. Through that, I came to realize that I could change the outcomes of these little businesses by paying attention to metrics and paying attention to sales. As much as it was not going to be a career path for me necessarily, I did end up moving around the U.S. and sort of cleaning up these small little camera stores for a large national camera chain.
No way.
And I'd be there for about 4 months at a time, kind of get them back on track and then go on to the next
But wait a minute. So you clearly got artist in you. You're taking photography, but you are helping them on the business side.
Yeah, I was running camera stores. Yeah.
So you really start to put a little bit of a playbook together of how to improve their business.
Yeah.
You may not have called it that back then.
So were you hired by the national camera chain?
Yeah, they
as
just
your
had
first job out of school,
Yeah.
kind of? Okay.
And I was just a little frontline camera store salesman guy. And then,
But you're learning, you're getting so many reps at understanding the problems, how to identify them, how to fix them.
yeah, if you, I still have these you guys probably have them, those little leather bound notebook things. You go back, I have little planners like that from back in the early 90s, and I had gridded them out, and I was tracking all of my business metrics just in paper, like weekly and monthly metrics, and all just kind of gridded out so I could look at them in one spot because I didn't.
What were some of the metrics? What were 1, 2, or 3 of the metrics?
These are all sales metrics, and a lot of it had to do with product placement. I learned a lot about relationships back then, and how relationships could end up having an impact on business performance. And so, those are longer stories, but I ended up sort of created basically professional camera stores inside these little locations. One of them was in we don't have Boscov's here, but they do in the Mid-Atlantic, right? So a little Boscov's department store. I had full lines of professional cameras, which was unheard of for this camera chain, because we just figured out how to manage the metrics and manage the relationships in a way that allow us to be sort of more successful in these tiny little businesses.
I'm going to keep firing at you, because what's one thing you learned pragmatically about relationships?
I think in business, perhaps we don't really realize all the time how interdependent we all truly are. It comes out a lot in negotiation, where you think of a negotiation as one party wins, the other party loses a lot of times, right? Where there's some sort of fixed outcome or zero-sum outcome. There are ways in business relationships to create victories for everybody if you look for them, pay attention to them. I don't think that, well, at least in my experience, I'm not sure it happens often enough. And so if you can, have the foresight to enter into a business relationship in a way that's genuinely looking to benefit the other person as much as yourself. There's nothing wrong with being selfish if you're doing it in this mutual way. I don't know. I do think things tend to turn out better. It did for me.
I'm not surprised you're successful, because that's a long view of success, that every relationship you enter, you're believing both can win in this exercise.
Yeah, I mean, our last firm, last company I worked at, we knew we couldn't, we were a good sized company, but we weren't the biggest that our partners, let's say, were dealing with. We knew we could never be their biggest relationship in a lot of cases. Some cases, most cases, we could never be their biggest relationship. But there was no reason we couldn't be their best one. And so that was our goal. We set out to try to be the best relationship our partners had. We made sure they knew everything about us, everything about our business, what our goals were. I worked then in a regulated business like you guys. The regulator's office here in Dallas was literally across the street from my office. We would invite them to our monthly company meetings. They didn't need, better relationship with our regulators. Not going to get us out of things. We weren't doing it that way. But we're in an ecosystem together. They should know us. We 100%. Should know them. We should look for ways to just get to know each other better.
Well, you think about, I think about my experience in a camera store, which is, there's not a lot. I don't have a lot of experience to draw on, but it's very transactional.
Yeah.
Like you go in, you buy the lens, you buy the body of the camera, you buy a bag, whatever, whatever it is, but it's very transactional. It's not, there's not a lot of relationship building going on. So the fact that you did that early on in a fairly transactional business.
Yeah, this so that you guys will appreciate this. This is where sort of the first ideas of fiduciary duty show up, right? Because you're right, I'm selling a camera to somebody. I've got 8 cameras behind me. Some of them are offering me incentives to sell them. Other ones aren't. And so what are you going to do? You're going to decide to sell the one that's going to pay you the $8 spiff, or are you going to sell the one that's actually better for the person that's going to give you nothing necessarily?
Right.
You have to wrestle with these decisions in even transactional business dealings, right?
Yeah.
And so whether you're regulated or choose into these kind of relationships, you can still handle everything as if you're a fiduciary, even if you're not, right?
So how long were you in the camera?
4 years.
4 years.
Not a ton of time.
Yeah.
But
how many places did you go to?
I was in all over the Mid-Atlantic, so like Philadelphia, Wilmington, Levittown, Pennsylvania.
But 20 camera stores, 50 cameras?
Maybe 8 or so, I think. Yeah,
awesome.
Not a ton. Because they were 4 to 6 months at a time.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So where's that take you?
So that took me back. So Massachusetts, Philadelphia, then back to Massachusetts. And then in 2000, I moved to Dallas. I moved to Dallas for the woman who's now my ex-wife. And so probably like half the people, you either are chasing a relationship here or you're chasing a job here. And so that's what got me to Dallas. I'm glad I'm here. It's a lovely city. It's been very good to me.
How long ago did you move here?
2000.
2000. You said that. Yeah. Yep. Sorry.
I started working as I had through the camera store experience, I think I'd gotten an appreciation for numbers and finance. And so while having no background in any of that, I was committed to getting a job in the financial services industry. And I went and I quit the camera store, just instant, at 4 years in, I'm like, This I started here because it was 1992 and jobs were not plentiful and I needed income to pay my rent. It turned into a successful endeavor for me, and I did not want to continue on that path because it was not going to be a great path for me long term. And so I applied for any financial services job I could get.
Any reason why you were drawn to financial services?
All the numbers, man. All the numbers. It was fascinating to me. And so, but I didn't know what I wanted to do in financial services. Right. I wasn't an investor then. I didn't know. I applied to accounting jobs and finance jobs, and I ended up at State Street Bank and Trust Company. So I ended up in the financial services industry. We were doing, they still do, custody and accounting for mutual funds. And so I ended up doing that for another 4 years. And so that's how I found my way into the financial services industry. And I just had great experiences there. I tried to absorb myself in the financial service industry as much as I could. I went through Euro conversion and Y2K and conversions of big mutual fund companies to the bank. I ended up with really cool experiences. Like I could do unbalanced general ledger entries. There were only a handful of us who could do that. I was doing, I was one of the few people who knew how to repatriate Malaysian ringgits back to US dollars. Like I just ended up with these really sort of fascinating experiences that I had no plan for any of that, right? You just did the best to learn the most I could at the thing that was in front of me at the time. And so anyway.
It's incredible.
So 4 years at State Street.
4 years at State Street, then to Dallas. I quit that job, came to Dallas.
Oh, so State Street was still in Massachusetts.
Gotcha. Yeah, quit that job, came to Dallas. And then got a job working at what became a almost 20-year journey in financial services. So I joined that firm just as a frontline employee and eventually worked my way up over, a course of maybe 8 years, worked my way up to president of the company. And so that was a founder-led organization. I was very blessed to be, the guy who got to be by his right-hand side as we built that business into something that was already tremendous when I got there, but I think certainly even more tremendous by the time we left.
So in 8 years, you start from front line to president of the organization.
Yes.
Wow. When you started, how many team members? And when you left, how many team members?
Employee base was probably very similar, although the revenue of the company was dramatically different, right? Yep. So we continued to optimize the business. So I will tell you there's two things that caused me to go from frontline employee to president of the company in 8 years. One was I was incredibly curious. Because everything was new. Everything I got handed, I'd never done before. I thought that was fascinating, right?
As opposed to everything new and you were like, no, I'm going the opposite direction.
No, exactly. It was great. I was like, okay, let's figure it out.
Let's figure it out.
And I can go into more into that. I mean, the second thing was, it was really clear, especially if when you're earlier in your career, it was really clear to me that generally speaking, people with higher level of authority than me were more than willing to abdicate power, authority, and responsibility to me if I was going to take it on. They were busy, right? And so if I could just take something on, it wasn't even delegation. It was just abdication, right?
Yeah,
it's like, you do it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Figure it out. And so that was there were so many opportunities to go do stuff that were for jobs that were more advanced than mine. I mean, it was a small organization. Maybe that made it even easier. I don't know. But there were great opportunities for me to just pick up pieces of other people's jobs. I became an executive in the company. This is the story I'm told from people who were there. Became an executive in the company when they couldn't do an executive meeting without me anymore.
That's called irreplaceable.
That's exactly right. So, David and I have known each other for a decade-ish. More, yeah, 12 years maybe. And so what I know of David is incredible amount of curiosity, always not reinventing self, but just always on to the next thing with a lot of curiosity, and then the ability to kind of burrow in and get really granular with whatever it is that he's working on. And I can only imagine at this company, just as he took on a project, he just kind of ran it out to the nth degree. And then, it was 10x what it was before he started. And they're like, okay, well, here's another one, Yeah,
I mean, the thing we built there was, full investment advisory platform. That was 2003 or 2004. I mean, for most firms, there were RIAs then, but they weren't big RIAs then. For most of the financial services industry, it had still not figured out how to convert over from largely commissionable businesses to fee-based practices. And so even in many of the commissionable businesses, which we were, unlike True North, we still had desires for having fiduciary relationships and a fee-based asset management program. And so that's what I built, right? That didn't really exist inside that organization. We took that from, I think it was 300 million in assets under management kind of existed to, I think it was 6 or 7 billion when we sold it. We got
all under a fee.
What's that?
The 300 million was under a fee.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you grew the fee-based business.
Yeah. We got to have a lot of fun with it. But we built that from nothing, right? And so that was a ton of fun. I don't know. Again, but I knew nothing about the investment advisory business, right? And so I just asked a lot of questions.
What was the frontline position that you took when you joined?
The title of the position, I think, was operations and process specialist. Basically, like I got to the first day of work, and I've been hired by people who thought we were going to have 90% growth in the year 2000, which they did not have. So they hired me just because I guess they thought I knew things about mutual funds, which they sold. They handed me to the head of operations my first day of work. He asked me what I did. I told him what I did. He's like, "We don't do any of that here." And then they handed me 4,000 envelopes to put in alphabetical order.
But you did it well.
I did, apparently.
I want to know from, as we kind of talk with business owners, you seem, and kind of piggyback on what Scott said, if and when you have found yourself stuck, have you ever found yourself stuck?
Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
How have you worked your way through that? Maybe personally and professionally here, David, but start professionally. Are there tools that you've learned? Are there things? How do you get yourself unstuck?
Yeah, I mean, I perhaps you guys will share this viewpoint. I have not found a situation yet that can't be figured out. Like I can't always make the situation be what I want it to be necessarily, but I can always find a way to have some level of control over it.
Every problem is an opportunity.
Yeah, but it truly is. Like,
correct.
I mean, and I think we've been able to, the companies that I've been part of, I think we've been able to do more in the face of real challenges. Like I took over running that wealth management business the week of Lehman weekend, right? I mean, that was a bad moment for financial services firms, and we did fine. We figured it out.
Yep.
Would I make some different decisions? Maybe, but I mean, we did as well as we knew how to do it.
Exactly.
Because we had, I don't know, a fair amount of optimism around what we could do. Part of the way I test that, and I do less of it now, I've got a 12-year-old son who keeps me busy, but I like to problem solve to some degree outside of my work life. Like I like to work on automobiles.
Okay.
And you get stuck and like, I don't know how to do this. I've never done it before. There's YouTube videos to figure it out. Like this car got built somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I can figure it out.
Magically come together. I'll figure it out. There's an answer here. There's a way to figure it out. Maybe I've got to bring in an outside resource. Maybe I don't. Maybe I can do it myself. I don't know what it is, and that translates well into the work world. Like when we get stuck, we can just sit down and try to figure out what the situation really is and figure what we're really dealing with, and stop telling ourselves stories and take the emotionality out of it. And figure out how to unstick yourself. Like what do you do if you're faced with this set of facts? There are answers there every time. Well, and it usually turns out okay.
And like some of it is, we've talked about this before, but just sort of getting up and going through the motions every day. And then over time, like the answer begins to reveal itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you go looking for it, and sort of force it, it's probably not going to happen. At least on the timeline that you want it to.
Yeah, agree. I mean, I don't always know what the outcome is we're going to arrive at, but I do, like if you're stuck, right? You got away from motivation, right? And that away from motivation, well, in a lot of cases, away from motivation is not necessarily ideal. It's not a bad place to start, right? And at some point, perhaps you develop enough of a viewpoint in your away from motivation to go get some towards motivation, right? Okay, great. Now we know what we're going towards. How do you bring that to life? But it's amazing how often just a little bit of optimism and belief in yourself actually makes things turn out pretty well.
Yep.
Because in those most difficult times, those are two of the things that often are the hardest to be. But that's the hardest time to be those things.
Right.
Is because the problem, the wall looks so right here. You said optimism and belief in yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Is what you said.
I did say that.
Yeah, it was really good. You strike me as a person, about how many people have you hired in your career?
Oh, God. Thousands. More than, I mean.
You're a business owner. You're talking to business owners. What's your strategy? What's your technique? What are you looking for? What are your flags? What are some process, thoughtful checklist things? What are you looking at?
Yeah, on the hiring side.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, I think a I'll start with like one foundational principle, because it's worked almost every time we've tried it, and it's failed almost every time we haven't. Like, if it's not a hell yeah, it's not a hire.
Wow.
And like, if you break from that because you need something done quickly, you got a project and you need to get a person on it, or you've got you've just got to figure out how to suffer through the gap and not be tempted by the quick hire. It's never worked. I ran one of the dining commons at UMass when I was there. I had 300 kids working for me. Like, from that point when I was 18 years old until 52, that every time I violated that principle, it's worked out badly.
Incredible. As you have built out a team, that hell yeah, that's typically you and the one or two other people in the interview process. If all 3 or 4 of you aren't hell yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
in our typical process, there's always a hiring manager.
Right.
And we try to make sure that the rest of us are advisors to the hiring manager, as opposed to taking their authority, responsibility, autonomy away from them, right? And so, while a CEO of the organization I'm in, I certainly have the power to veto whatever I want. That would be a silly thing to do to hiring managers, right? Now, if I get involved in the interview, I certainly am going to have an opinion, and we're all going to tell the hiring manager whether it's a hell yeah or no.
Yep.
But it is up to the hiring manager to decide whether or not they're going to listen to our advice. I'm also a big believer. I've been in smaller, mid-sized businesses through almost all my career. I mean, State Street aside, right? Massive business. But in more senior roles, I've been in smaller organizations. Smaller organizations don't have the luxury, in my view, of all of the formal career pathing that bigger companies have. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. It just is what it is.
Yep.
And so you're highly likely in a small or medium-sized business to end up with job descriptions that are not exactly right to the job the person's doing. You're going to end up with a lot of opportunity to do things outside of job description, and you're probably going to have business opportunities that come up that fall outside of anything you formally created, right? And so from a hiring standpoint, one of the things we focused on a lot is critical thinking, and it's not an intelligence thing. It's just like, I want to know how this person's going to do in an unstructured environment, because I don't want to stress somebody out with my more unstructured environment, right? I want it to feel empowering and exciting. I want people to thrive in that environment. And if they're not sort of if I don't think they're going to be in a position to do that, I think it's going to be an awkward, uncomfortable, difficult experience for them. I don't want to do that. And so while we don't hire based on that necessarily, it is a good data point for us to use, because we know it's going to be important in our environment. And so we try to go through, we have a service organization. We try to make sure we've got great service mentality. There's scores around that.
Right.
And so you bring this data set together, not just interviews, but actual data together, and try to create, try to see if you've got this ideal candidate in front of you.
Is there a tool you all used for critical thinking?
It is Watson Glaser.
Okay. I couldn't agree more. I think that, to me, sounds like problem solving.
So let's go back for a minute to your prior organization.
Yeah.
You were there 20 years. You started as a frontline employee. You ended up as president 8 years later. And then you guys started to think about exiting 3, 4, 5 years before you exited.
That's probably right.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about that journey and maybe why it took so long. Not that that's a long time, but just kind of what the thinking was around, hey, this is something that we may do. And what are some of the things that you did, you and the team, to get prepared?
Yeah.
And I would say prepare the business and then prepare personally, both for you and the founder.
Yeah. I think part of the reason it was as long as it was is because I'm not sure we were ever fully committed to exit, right?
Yeah.
I think for most businesses that at least have the idea that some type of exit event could occur, I think the question's always, is it better to go now? Is it better to wait till later? Mm-hmm. I think that's always in your mind. And that was in our mind for years. And at times you may go and test what the marketplace might do, right? Because in the beginning of the process, you don't really know. Like, is anybody going to be interested in this thing? Maybe from a financial planning perspective, you've got a picture in your head as to what the business valuation needs to be for an exit to occur, right? Maybe you got to go find out if someone's even that interested and willing to pay for it. And we had a sense of what we needed the business to be worth. And some of those early days, and we tested it and found the marketplace didn't think it was worth it, which was fine. We didn't.
That was okay.
Going. Yeah, it was totally fine.
It is what it is.
Yeah, we liked the business we had, and we thought we would just keep doing it.
And an advantage of starting early, you just give yourself more optionality.
Right.
You had optionality there.
I think for us,
Can I pause for 1 second on that? Yeah. So when you went to the market initially, and we're like, here's, you had a number in your head that you thought was the number or the range, and then the marketplace didn't support that, and you came back and you said, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z. Were there specific things that you walked away from the process and thought, okay, we need to increase margin by 3 points, we need to reduce headcount, we need to add X number of clients, or whatever?
No,
it wasn't that formulaic.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
We wanted to build a hell of a business.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the best way to describe it, right? And so engaged employees, passionate clients, growing revenue, good like all of this stuff is part of building a hell of a business, right?
Kind of the nuts and bolts, like the stuff you're supposed to do.
Yep.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. And I think rightly so. If you felt like if we really loved the business, if we loved it, right?
Yeah.
If we wanted to be in it, if we had no need, desire, or want to sell it, but a willingness to, then we would keep building what we were building and having the fun we were having and creating what we were creating, and someday it would turn out okay. But we didn't walk away from earlier views saying if we just increase margin by 2%, like it wasn't that formulaic. Did we run the business like a business with metrics and understood it, knew what our drivers were and all that? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I don't think we were so interested. We weren't so interested in exiting the business that we were going to go engage in business engineering, whether financial or cultural or anything else, in order to make that occur. Anything that we would have done because we felt it was good for all of our stakeholders.
You were focused on making the business the best that it could be.
Yeah.
And in fact, it could have cost you some proceeds at the end of the transaction, because you're investing in things that it's not like you weren't trying to engineer to a sale, inflate the EBITDA, and then have this big exit. You were like, we're going to build a great company, and then the market will seek its own level.
Correct. Yeah. I will say, to the exit point, I mean, there was the one thing I think we became very clear about, and this was all credit to the founder of the company. The exit needed to meet a multi-part test for us for it to be something we were interested in doing. And the best way to describe that is we needed to see that all of the business's stakeholders would be enriched in some way by a business transition. So we needed to make, like, for us, it would only be successful if our client's experience would somehow be better, right? If we couldn't improve the product, services, pricing, whatever, we couldn't improve the client experience through an exit, we weren't going to exit, right? If we couldn't improve the employee experience through an exit, we weren't going to exit. If there wasn't better career opportunities for them, if there weren't, opportunities for better healthcare benefits, being part of a larger organization, whatever, we weren't going to exit. If we couldn't, and so we went through essentially a stakeholder model. And the last person, and I won't go through all of it, the last person in the stakeholder model were the shareholders.
Yep.
Right? Enriching the shareholders was clearly part of it, but it was the last one on the list, right? So that kept us from doing what you're describing, Scott, the financial engineering or business engineering, because we wouldn't have been satisfied with just maximize the exit for the shareholders and forget about the stakeholders. Yeah. That wouldn't have been an acceptable exit for us. Everyone had to win.
Yeah.
Right? The brand had to be better. The marketplace had to perceive it better. The acquirer had to be enriched by it. Like everyone needed to have a victory from
like
it,
they
or
were
else
winning.
it wasn't a victory.
Yeah.
I mean, it does go back. You just said it. It goes back to, again, obviously, and you've given a lot of credit to the founder as well. This idea, though, that it's not an either or. It needed to be a both and for everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Everybody needed to leave this better.
Had to be.
So let's go back. When you initially had a number in mind and the marketplace didn't support that number, how did you guys come up with that number? Was it math driven, or was it like, no, it just this is my view of what I think it's worth, or what I'd like.
Yeah, I mean, the founder of the organization, he started a financial services firm, so his views on financial planning and financial preparation and being ready for what's going to come in life is very important to him. He's a now longtime cancer survivor, and he would credit his financial plan for saving his life.
Yeah.
And so because he could put all of his energy into his care, because his financial plan was so well done that he didn't need to worry about whether his business or his wife or his children or his siblings would be taken care of, the financial plan, like everything was in good shape.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for just a second.
Yeah.
So we've talked about this before, but we built this sort of pre-transaction planning platform, and the platform has 4 pillars on it. The 4 pillars are 2 on the personal side, 2 on the business side. It's coaching and wealth planning on the personal. It's building a great business and valuation on the business side. What's clear to me about your situation, one, is because you guys are in the financial planning space. Hopefully you weren't the cobbler's kids with no shoes. You guys actually did the work up front, did the wealth planning to create the structure, to make sure that everything flowed. And then, I know you and I know your founder, very thoughtful people about what's next. So can you talk about that aspect of the transaction a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can't talk as much about what was in the founder's head.
Sure.
I mean, although I've got my perspective on it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's his story, not mine. But I can tell you, he was, the only reason that we ended up selling the business, I think at the end of the day, was many factors. One of them certainly was the fact that he was prepared, I believe, for what was going to be on the other side.
Yeah. Which is unusual, by the way, I think.
It is.
Most founders are not.
But if the people listening to this podcast were to meet the founder of the organization I worked for before, they would not be surprised that he was fully prepared for what came next, right? Arguably one of the most thoughtful, philosophical, well put together people that I'll ever meet in my life, right?
Yeah.
And so
That definitely puts him in the minority.
Yeah.
Because that's not
the norm.
That's so much why we're doing this. So most of us don't naturally are that intentional.
My clientele at that last firm was CPA firms, and we had 300 CPA firms that were our clients. Those are all small businesses, all partnerships, all dealing with business valuation, all thinking about exit, like the exit conversations, business valuation, how do you create enterprise value? Like that was a daily occurrence for me. And we were probably a little bit more thoughtful as the coaches and advice providers to advice providers. For me, it was far less structured. And I think just personally, part of it was I felt such a responsibility as the operator of the business to the people that were my stakeholders, right? Employees, shareholders, et cetera. I didn't think a lot about me. And I probably, actually in hindsight, I probably should have done so more. That ended up creating some unexpected outcomes for me because I did not take the time through the exit process to think about what I was going to do next, what it was going to look like for me, how that process was going to go. And so that was a learning lesson for me. I don't think I would have extracted any energy from taking care of everybody. I felt a sense of duty to everyone there, but I was less thoughtful about my own wants, needs, and desires and what I would do next than I should have been.
And would you say that is more because of what you just articulated, which is you were truly focused on everybody else, or was it maybe a combination of, in addition to that, there's so much going on and I'm busy and, I don't really have time for me, David, to pull away and get quiet and get still and really think about what's next.
Both of them played a role, right? And I think they both played a meaningful role in it. I mean, I think that's the thing that's so interesting about what True North is doing with, the pre-transaction planning. I mean, you are creating an opportunity for business owners to pause for a moment and think about that. Mm-hmm. And I didn't really have a catalyst in my life at that point for doing that, right? There was no True North in my life that was making me pause and ask those questions and focus on it, right? I didn't have somebody giving me that advice. Should I have been wise enough to seek it out? Totally. Like I put that all on me, but without that sort of external pressure, there was no.
You're busy running a business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're willing, I loved your phrase, unexpected outcomes is what you said, because you weren't as thoughtful about your journey. What'd you find yourself 3 months, 6 months, 9 months afterwards? Because again, we're helping someone else maybe take the energy to get some thoughtfulness on the pre-side. Where'd you find yourself that you could have maybe prevented yourself getting to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an answer to this, and then you can explore it if you want. In the current company, I mean, I've done 2 acquisitions, and I've got 3 founders across those 2 companies, plus the founder of the core business, are all part of the business we're in today. So I have now 3 of the 4 founders of the 3 companies still working there. I resolved to treat the founders of the businesses we acquired in a way that I didn't personally experience. And so there was definitely learning lessons that came through what I went through.
Because you stayed on for a little while.
I did, yeah. I mean, I stayed. I was there for about 9 months post transaction. But I do think, for a seller, I think, really being very thoughtful about who you're selling to and why, for you personally, right? I mean, this is the piece that I missed. It was great. I mean, I think strategically the transaction was excellent, right? Yeah. And I think it achieved the financial objectives that we had for it. I found myself unneeded, unwanted, and probably, and I found myself in far more negative position than I think I would have anticipated finding myself in after what I built. I had contributions there, but after the business we created together, I don't know. I mean, I had for better or for worse, had a view of my value that was immediately extinguished at the moment the ink was dry.
Yep. I absolutely,
and that was hard.
Very.
Yeah.
I absolutely want to dig into that. Coach, again, we've got 100, 1,000, 10,000 business owners considering one point selling. Coach us up. What questions should we be asking ourselves or the buyer? Help us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more you can get to know the culture of the buyer. I mean, I think you've got to be very clear before we go into this, right? Because if this is economic, if the transaction is economically focused, then some of the stuff doesn't really matter, right? If you can't see yourself as the founder going to work in the business, then some of this stuff doesn't really matter. Like some of this very much, what do you want to do next? Yep. Like, do you want to be part of the go forward business, or have you planned on an exit that will allow you to go somewhere else? For our founder, there was zero intention to be in the go forward business.
Right.
It would have been, there were other things that the exit gave him an opportunity to go pursue in life. It was a fork in the road that had great stuff on the other side of the fork, right? For me as the operator, non-founder, staying in the business or doing something now, I had a much more traditional path to follow. So some of it's going to depend, right? For the founders that are still in our business, they very much, I think, want to be in the business, right? Yep. Which is why 3 of the 4 of them are still there. So if that's the path you want to follow, right, you want to stay in the business you've created in some way, then, and you think you're capable of being in that environment where all of a sudden you've got a boss or whatever it is, right? Then you've got to get very clear on things like culture, personality, value system, right? How decisions get made. You've got to go back into, this combination of sort of cultural and corporate decision making that will become necessary, because if you can't get along with somebody who's got decision-making authority in the business, or you find that there are business practices that don't align with your value system, like you can't ignore that or sweep it under the rug. They will show up.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that's the case for me, but you've got to do enough diligence on who your partner is going to be.
And what your real why is. What do you want from this?
Well, that's the first question, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Again, there are some founders who very clearly want to go do the next thing.
Yep.
Like being part of the go forward business is not for them. But for others, if you're ready to, like, I think for the founders of the businesses we've acquired, there's an interest in getting back to the sort of founding ethos. We're a technology company, right? And so our founders are responsible for the products they created, and we've given them the space to be the product owners, product creators, product visionaries, without having to worry about making payroll or managing.
Which is really how they got started in the first place.
Yeah. And so we've tried to create conditions where we're a founder-friendly acquirer. We'll take over all of the shared service crap and let them go focus on the sort of product creation joy.
Yep.
And if that works for them, then it's we think it's a magical environment, right? Like everyone wins in that case. But they've got to, those founders really needed to get to know us better, like really know us.
Because if you had a founder, this is DocuPace, right? If you had a founder who said, no, my expertise is really in management, you might have to have a hard conversation with that founder, because you may or may not.
So not necessarily.
Okay, go.
One of the founders of one of the acquired companies, he's head of software engineering for all three combined businesses, right? Because we had a need, that was a thing he could do, that was where he could make the contribution, and so he's not necessarily the product person in that case. He's everything, right?
So your style is, again, trying to understand, as you would acquire a company, what's his or her founder's unique ability,
right.
What do they love, passion, and is there a fit to stay in the ongoing go forward business?
Yeah, and we'll try to do everything we can to create that fit,
correct,
right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't even need to be an existing fit necessarily.
Right.
It could be a fit we could create, but there has to be a fit.
Yep.
And then there has to be intent. I say we've got 3 out of 4. We don't have 4 out of 4. For one of them, who I think we've got a ton of respect for, just having a boss was probably less exciting for him. And again, I don't judge that. That's
100%.
That's great. That's the clarity is more important than anything else.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Makes a ton of sense. When did you start this?
Well, how long have I been here?
DocuPace?
Yeah.
You didn't start that.
I did not.
You didn't.
I'm the private equity hired gun guy.
Okay. Amazing. How long have you been involved in?
I've been there 3.5 years.
Yeah.
I was a customer of this business for a decade prior.
No way.
And so I know the company's 21 years old.
Okay.
I know the founder.
Okay.
I was his client for a decade. He's still on the team. He's an amazing contributor. Everyone loves him. Our clients love him. They know, I'm the person right now. I'm the person I think that's there to help the business realize the true embedded potential of what was originally created.
Okay.
I'm not skilled in anything that we do. My job is to bring out the best in all the people around me, right? And so if I do that well, then we'll all do better.
I would love to know your kind of first conversation with a founder. You're thinking about acquiring them.
Yeah.
Walk us through. What are you looking for? What's that look like? When you leave that first meeting, what do you want to have known? What do you want to take away from that?
Because you've got, this is private equity driven, right? So you've got your private equity team sending you people sending you opportunities. You may be
Or
sourcing
we
some on
create
your
them.
own.
You're
Either way.
sourcing them.
I mean, it's a team
Yeah.
process of sourcing. So for us, right, there are two things we're looking for in early conversations. One is there a mutual belief that our technologies would work better together than they would separately? Meaning, if we could bring the two businesses together and feel like we could serve a marketplace better together than we could if we were just out there on our own, then that's lovely. Like, that's a great opportunity. It's like there's synergy. We're not talking about the traditional, like, get rid of cost synergy. We're talking about just like overall business synergy. We'll grow faster. We'll be happier. Our teams will have more opportunity. Like, this will just be cooler if we do it together than if we did it separately, right? If you don't have to do a lot of diligence for that. If you could both look at each other and be like, this would be cool, that's a good sign, right? The second one is, I think I want to walk away with the sense that this is somebody that I would want to have in the organization and part of our culture and would fit well with us. And so you'll have some most of us who've been in the business world long enough can do pretty good quick judgments of character, right?
Little sniff test.
Yeah, I mean, it could change as you go through it, but I want to walk away with some early indication that, like, I'd want to, like, hang out with these people 100%. For the next decade or more, right? And so I think if I can walk away with those two things, initial conversation, we're kind of excited about what could happen here. We kind of like each other. That's good. That's a good enough start. Because if you can't get past those two things, like, this doesn't, like, we're not getting excited about this conversation and what we could do together. It doesn't really matter if it makes market sense, financial sense, any of that. Like, we're just
not going to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, oh God, this person's a jerk, or I don't know, like, we just don't mesh. I mean, we got to work. Like, I want it to be a founder-friendly organization, and if I don't think I can create that for that person, then I'm going to miss out on the opportunity to create a founder-friendly organization. I'm just going to look like a financial buyer.
So, what's your vision for DocuPace from here? Because you've been there a couple of years.
I mean, we're building a back office ecosystem for enterprise wealth management firms, and so
say that again. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, we're building a back office ecosystem for enterprise wealth management firms. So for a lot of wealth management firms, certainly the larger you get, the more often this shows up. The back office operations are complicated. Most firms have created really cool client experiences. The financial advisors have cool tech, but all the people who've got to, like, make the promise come true, that's
pretty disjointed.
That's pretty disjointed. That stuff's hard. There's a lot of, like, manual movement of data, and things aren't as well connected together. And thankfully,
nothing talks to each other.
Most firms do a good job of keeping clients from seeing it. My concern is that the operations of most wealth management firms don't enrich the financial planning process. Meaning a client who goes through a financial planning process has to talk about two things that they hate talking about: money and mortality. But you'll get through it. You'll have the conversation. You'll talk about money and mortality, and you will end up with a financial plan that is the embodiment of your hopes, dreams, and aspirations, and the other side of all the pain you've gone through. And then you've got to get to implementing. Like, you've got to actually turn it into real accounts and real investments and real whatever. And then it gets screwed up. Like, your name gets spelled wrong. It takes too long. Like, something goes wrong. And then you hesitate. And then, like, you have the next moment in life and you hesitate. Like, do I call my financial advisor and try to talk about the 529 plan or selling my business or whatever? Because, like, last time I did it, was painful, and then it was painful again. Like, do I want to really do that? And so if we can make the back office experiences for wealth management firms more frictionless, it will do all of the traditional business stuff, like save them cost and whatever. But I think it turns financial planning into financial planning well executed, which is good for the industry as a whole. Well, so that's what we do.
Yeah, and the way I think about that, and you can use this, feel free to use this, is that ultimately, the advisor's most valuable time is in front of the client. Like, face to face in front of the client. And if they have to burn hours and hours and hours preparing, collecting, pulling things together in order to be in front of the client, like, it's not efficient, right? Because we want all that to be really efficient for the advisor so that they can maximize the time in relationship, building, a trusted relationship.
Yeah, I don't know what you can, if it's 70-30 back office to face, we'd love to flip that, have it 70% with the client and 30% on the back end.
Right.
Yep.
Because, an hour traded for face-to-face relationship time is priceless. Like you can't put a price tag on that.
That's why we do this for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of, again, some of the largest brands that people would know in wealth management are all clients of ours using components of our technology, or all of our technology.
So what I love about David's perspective is, one, he's lived in the financial services world for the last 25 years.
Yeah.
So he's got, great, deep experience, perspective, expertise in financial services and wealth management. So he's got that. He's very thoughtful himself. He worked for a founder at the prior firm, also very thoughtful and very intentional, process-oriented about, their own exit. And then, now has had a couple of different opportunities with different organizations. So, as we think about coaching business owners and entrepreneurs from here, what are the, we always like to ask the question, we got, 50 YPO guys guys and gals sitting in the audience with their businesses. What's the 1, 2, or 3 things that you would advise them on as they begin to think about one day selling their business?
Yeah, I think we've talked about a bunch of it. I think the things that we haven't talked about that I might try to quickly add to that conversation.
Yeah, please.
I think one, and we've dealt with this, and we continue to deal with it, but I'm conscious of it. There's going to be a perpetual temptation between to want to wait 6 more months, a year and a half, 2 years, whatever, before you exit. Like, if you don't have a business owner that's excited about their prospects in the next 12 months, then they don't have a business to sell, right? And so you're never going to get away, from feeling like it's too early to sell. Because if you ever feel like now's the time to sell, then maybe it's too late, right? You should always be optimistic.
Maybe there's a reason for that.
The next year, correct? Like, you should always feel that way. And so if you can acknowledge that you're going to always live in that tension, then for me the question becomes: what are you going to have a deeper sense of regret around? Are you going to have a deeper sense of regret around selling too early, or are you going to have a deeper sense of regret around waiting too long? And it's
great question,
and it's clear to me what the answer is, right? And so I think if you can get clear then on that, right? It's like, I'm always going to feel bullish. What am I going to want to have a sense of regret around? Because I will have regret. Like, it's possible you'll be like, oh my God, I timed it perfectly. Like, you hear those stories. That rarely happens, right?
Exactly.
You're going to have regret. You'll either have done it too late or you've done it too early. I'd rather have done it too early than too late. I think then you have to ask yourself the question: what are the combination of factors that are applied to our business right now? Like, take all of the internal and external factors and try to just assess them. Like, is your employee engagement at its peak? Like, if you got peak employee engagement, great, that's a good factor. How's your sales pipeline look? If your sales pipeline is great, and that's a good factor, right? If your customer satisfaction is higher than ever, that's a good factor. If there are, like, you can see these business factors, like, hey, we've got peak business factors happening around the business, great. That's a good position to be selling from rather than declines. The second one is, what are the external factors that are going to weigh on the business, right? Are interest rates going to have an effect on us? If so, how do we feel about what those going to be like going forward? We were in a regulated business. We were asking ourselves, what's regulatory policy going to look like going forward versus now? What's the business impact of those regulatory policy changes? Like, you add up all the external factors, and if you can sort of analyze each piece, they're not all going to be peak, but you might look at them and say, this combination of factors, for me to get peak employee engagement and peak pipeline and peak profitability and a set of market factors that look like this, for that to align like this again, that's a 5-year cycle. And so what I'd rather try to capture, like, okay, I can be bullish about my business over the next year, but do I know enough about what the world looks like to be clearly bullish about it over the next 5? And if you can't get that kind of clarity, then it points to exploration today, right?
Well, and what I love about all that you said it, but I'm going to say it a different way, which is, I love the tension, because the tension's real, right? The tension, because there's always like, oh gosh, I could get a little more revenue, I could get another point on margin, I could, a little bigger pipeline, higher ranking on best places to work, or whatever. there's always, you can always try to do more, but if you are building the business with the end in mind, so like you said earlier, we were just trying to build a great business.
Right.
We were just trying to make the business the best that it could possibly be. And so, said differently, build with the end in mind, then likely when the timing's right, a lot of those not all of them, but a lot of those factors ought to be lining up where you're like, okay, I recognize the I don't know what the right word is, but it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Right. I'm never going to hit every factor. So let me get, 80, 85% of the way there, because I'm just consistently my business is great. I'm consistently hitting on all these things, and then let's go.
Yeah.
Don't be greedy.
Don't be greedy. You should all, even I'm private equity owned today. We're still building for greatness, not for sale.
Yeah.
It's a lot clearer in the private equity owned world that I'm going to get recapitalized at some point. I don't know when, I don't know to who, I don't know how. It's going to happen. And so I could be focused on building for sale. But if I end up focusing if I'm building for greatness, then the sale will look fine.
Yeah.
I will say the other thing I'd add, which we haven't brought up, because I saw this a lot in the CPA firms that we work with, and I certainly saw it in the business that I'm running today. But businesses don't focus on enterprise value enough. They might focus on revenue. They might focus on profitability. They don't focus on enterprise value in business operation. And so they don't consider, I don't think enough, consider activities that create scale, repeatability, or more importantly, the ability to transition the business. Yep. Because scalability, repeatability in the business is definitely a good cost driver. But if you've got scalability and repeatability in your business, you can transition it. If you don't have scalability and repeatability, you can't transition. If your policies and procedures suck and you're still on QuickBooks and you should be on a different ERP, and if you've got a business that hasn't focused on operations, process, quality, because that's whatever stuff bigger companies do, I don't know. You're going to hurt. You're going to literally take multiples off the business. If you can't move, as our last founder said, if you can't move the snowball from one freezer to the other without it melting, you got a problem, right?
Great analogy.
And so that doesn't get paid attention to enough, especially because business operators are too busy, I think, a lot of times trying to figure out how to grow revenue, look for the next sale, build the next product, right? And they don't focus enough on the totality of the enterprise. If culture is not strong, if the processes aren't good, you're taking multiples off. And so thinking about enterprise value will force you to think about the combination of revenue and the multiple that's applied to revenue, EBITDA, discounted cash flow, however your business gets valued in whatever industry you're in.
Well, it also resets your time frame, right? Because enterprise value, you can do some cute little things to, short-term pump up enterprise value, but real enterprise value creation are the things. The things that you talked about, which is scaling processes, repeatability, a business generating machine that, is creating leads all the time, creating new prospects all the time. It's not dependent on any one person, certainly not the founder. That's where real enterprise value gets created, and that takes years.
It does. For professional services businesses, this is particularly acute, right? The professional services business I would argue, has no enterprise value without process. Because if you take the founder or the professional services team out of the business, what do you got? Right. And I think professional services businesses can have tons of enterprise value, but they need process probably more than anybody, right? They need it to be systemic and repeatable, or you've got to be able to sell the playbook as much as the people.
That's right. Yep.
So I had not brought these things up, and
that's good. That's good.
David, that was phenomenal. Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you for so many takeaways. I know for me, negotiation, everyone wins is an incredible principle for life. I bet you that's why you're going to be employed or be a founder or owner as long as you want to be, because you work to make sure everybody wins. David, thanks for joining us on Decision Points.
Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.